Upon receiving a delivery, the millionaire's daughter froze when she saw the truck driver looked exactly like her and was wearing the same ring, the same one her father gave her 27 years ago. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Thornton mansion, casting golden rays across the Italian marble floors that Isabella had walked on every day for the past 27 years. She stood in her walk-in closet, fingertips grazing the silk of a Hermès scarf, but her mind wasn't on the day ahead. Something felt different today. The same restless feeling that had been gnawing at her for weeks, like a song she couldn't quite remember. Isabella Thornton had everything money could buy: the sprawling Beverly Hills estate, designer clothes that most people only saw in magazines, and a trust fund that could support several small countries. Yet lately, she'd been waking up with an inexplicable emptiness, as if a piece of her was missing. She'd mentioned it to her therapist, Dr. Reeves, who'd suggested it might be related to her adoption, something her mother Valerie had always been oddly vague about. Miss Isabella, Maria, the housekeeper, knocked softly on the doorframe. "Your breakfast is ready on the terrace." "Thanks." "Maria, I'll be right down." Isabella selected a casual but expensive outfit, designer jeans that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a cashmere sweater that felt like clouds against her skin. As she fastened her watch, the emerald ring on her finger caught the light. The ring she'd worn since she was a baby, according to her father. "Made especially for our precious daughter," he'd always said, though something in his eyes suggested there was more to that story. The emerald ring was exquisite. Colombian emerald set in white gold with an intricate design that she'd never seen replicated anywhere else. It was her most treasured possession, more valuable to her than all the other jewelry combined, though she couldn't explain why. Downstairs, the mansion felt emptier than usual. Her father, Matthew, was already at the office. He practically lived there, running his logistics empire that spanned half the country. Valerie was at her usual Thursday morning yoga class, followed by lunch with the ladies from the charity board. Isabella sometimes wondered if her parents actually enjoyed each other's company, or if they just maintained their marriage for appearances. She was halfway through her avocado toast when the doorbell rang. Maria was upstairs, so Isabella walked to the front door herself, something that would have horrified Valerie, who believed that wealthy people should never answer their own doors. "Good morning. I have a delivery for Mr. Thornton," said the voice on the other side of the door. "Some urgent documents that need his signature." Isabella opened the heavy oak door, expecting to see the usual courier in a uniform. Instead, she found herself staring at what felt like looking into a mirror. The woman standing on her doorstep was her exact double. Same height, same build, same face, same dark hair, even the same small scar above the left eyebrow that Isabella had gotten from falling off her bike at age 6. But this woman was dressed in simple work clothes, faded jeans, a plain t-shirt, and work boots that had seen better days. Her hands were calloused, her nails short and practical. For a moment, neither woman spoke. They just stared at each other in complete shock. "What the hell?" the stranger whispered, her voice carrying a slight accent that suggested she wasn't from Beverly Hills. Isabella's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Who are you?" "I'm Harper Caldwell. I work for Express Logistics. I have documents for Matthew Thornton." Harper's eyes never left Isabella's face. "But what I really want to know is who you are, and why you look exactly like me. I'm Isabella Thornton. This is my house." Isabella's voice came out shakier than she intended. "And I have no idea why we look alike." Harper shifted the document envelope to her other hand, and that's when Isabella saw it. On Harper's right ring finger was a ring that made Isabella's blood turn to ice. It was identical to her own. The same Colombian emeralds, the same white gold setting, the same intricate design that her father had always claimed was one of a kind, made exclusively for her. "Your ring," Isabella whispered, pointing at Harper's hand. Harper looked down at her own finger, then back at Isabella. "What about it?" "I have the same one." Isabella held up her hand, and both women stared at the two identical rings sparkling in the morning sunlight. "That's impossible," Harper said, but her voice lacked conviction. "My ring is unique. It's the only thing my father left me before he disappeared. My father said the same thing about mine, that it was made especially for me." They stood there in the doorway, two women who looked like twins, but had lived completely different lives, wearing identical rings that were supposed to be one of a kind. "Look, I don't know what kind of game this is," Harper said, though she sounded more confused than angry. "But I need to deliver these documents and get back to work. I've got 3 more deliveries before noon." "Wait." Isabella grabbed Harper's arm without thinking. The touch sent an electric shock through both of them, a recognition that went deeper than appearance. "This isn't a game. I've never seen you before in my life, but I feel like I know you. Don't you feel it too?" Harper's tough exterior cracked for just a moment. "Yeah," she admitted quietly. "I do. It's the weirdest thing. But when I look at you, it's like looking at myself. But not just physically, it's like..." She struggled for the words. "Like looking at a missing piece," Isabella finished. "Exactly." Isabella made a decision that would change everything. "Come in, please. Let's figure this out." Harper hesitated. "I can't. I'm working, and I don't belong in a place like this." "Forget about belonging. This is bigger than social rules or work schedules. 2 people don't just randomly look identical and wear the same impossible-to-duplicate ring. There's something going on here, and I think we both deserve to know what it is." After a long moment, Harper nodded. "Okay, but just for a few minutes." As they walked into the foyer, Harper's eyes widened at the opulence around her. The crystal chandelier, the marble staircase, the original paintings that were probably worth more than she'd make in a lifetime. But Isabella was watching Harper's face, noting how she carried herself with a dignity that had nothing to do with money. "Can I ask you something?" Isabella said as they sat in the living room. "Where did you grow up?" "Fresno. My mom Rachel raised me on her own. She's a seamstress." Harper's voice held no shame, just facts. "What about you?" "Here, Beverly Hills. My parents are Matthew and Valerie Thornton." Isabella paused. "Though I'm adopted. They told me when I was young, but they've always been vague about the details." Harper's eyes sharpened. "Adopted? When?" "I don't know exactly. As a baby, I think. I was born 27 years ago in Fresno. March 15th. Isabella's world tilted. "That's my birthday." They stared at each other again, the implications hanging heavy in the air between them. "Harper," Isabella said slowly, "I think we might be sisters." 28 years earlier, the rain drummed against the windows of the Thornton mansion as Rachel Caldwell polished the silver in the dining room. At 22, she was grateful for the job. Domestic work paid better than the factory jobs most girls from her neighborhood could get. The Thorntons treated her well enough, and Mrs. Valerie was in England with Mr. Matthew for 3 months on business, leaving Rachel to maintain the house in peaceful quiet. She didn't expect Matthew Thornton to return alone. "Rachel." His voice startled her as she arranged fresh flowers in the crystal vase. "I didn't know you were still here. Mr. Thornton, I thought you weren't coming back until next month." She smoothed her uniform, suddenly conscious of how she must look. Hair escaping its neat bun, sleeves rolled up from work. Change of plans. Valerie decided to stay longer in London. Something about visiting distant relatives. There was something different about him, a weariness that hadn't been there before, and the way his eyes lingered on her face made her heart skip. What started as late dinners while he worked became long conversations about books, dreams, and the loneliness that big houses could hold. What became stolen kisses in empty hallways turned into a love affair that both of them knew was impossible. "This can't continue," Rachel whispered one evening as they stood on the terrace, the city lights of Beverly Hills twinkling below them. "Mrs. Valerie will be back soon." "I know." Matthew's hands trembled as he touched her face. "But I can't stop feeling like you're the missing piece I never knew I was looking for." When Rachel discovered she was pregnant, Matthew's world collapsed. The passionate, caring man she'd fallen in love with became a stranger driven by panic and desperation. "You have to disappear," he told her, pressing an envelope thick with cash into her hands. "I'll make sure you're taken care of." "But this child, I can never acknowledge this child." Rachel's heart shattered, but she understood. She was nobody, a poor girl from the wrong side of town. He was Matthew Thornton, with a reputation and a marriage to protect. What neither of them knew was that Valerie had cut her England trip short. She found the letters hidden in Matthew's desk drawer. Passionate, desperate letters from Rachel talking about their future together. Valerie's hands shook, as she read words of love that Matthew had never spoken to her, promises of devotion that belonged to another woman. But Valerie Thornton hadn't built her social position by giving up easily. She'd married Matthew for his money and status, and she'd be damned if some little housemaid was going to destroy what she'd worked so hard to achieve. The plan that formed in her mind was as cruel as it was clever. She tracked down Rachel to a small clinic outside the city, where the poor girl was trying to figure out how to raise a child on her own. Valerie waited, watched, and when the time was right, she struck. "Miss Caldwell?" The nurse looked nervous as she entered Rachel's room. "There's someone here to see you." Valerie walked in wearing her most expensive coat and her coldest smile. "Hello, Rachel. We need to talk." "Mrs. Thornton." Rachel struggled to sit up in the hospital bed, her newborn daughters sleeping in the bassinets beside her. "I didn't expect twins," Valerie observed, looking at the babies with calculating eyes. "How interesting. Matthew doesn't know about that detail, does he?" Rachel's blood turned cold. "What do you want?" "I want what's mine. My husband. My marriage. My life. Everything you tried to steal." Valerie's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "But I'm a reasonable woman. I'm willing to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" Valerie moved closer to the bassinets, studying the identical babies. "I'll take one of them. Raise her as my own daughter. Give her every advantage money can buy. You can keep the other one and disappear forever." "You're insane." Rachel tried to get out of bed, but she was still weak from delivery. "I won't give you my children." "You will. If you're smart." Valerie pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I've had some very creative lawyers working while you've been here. Bank records showing large deposits to your account that suggest you've been blackmailing my husband. Forged letters in your handwriting threatening to destroy our marriage unless he pays you. Enough evidence to have you arrested for extortion and lose both children to the state." Rachel's world crumbled as she looked through the fabricated evidence. It was expertly done, convincing enough to destroy her life completely. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I already have, but I'm offering you a choice. Give me one daughter willingly, and you can keep the other, and this money." Valerie placed another envelope on the bed. "Refuse, and I'll have you arrested tonight. Both children will go into the system, and you'll go to prison, which sounds better to you." Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she looked at her sleeping daughters. Identical in every way, beautiful and perfect, and hers. "If I agree," she whispered, "how do I know you won't hurt her?" "Because I want Matthew to love me through her. I'll raise her as the daughter I could never give him naturally. She'll have the best of everything. Education, opportunities, love, more than you could ever provide working in factories." Rachel's heart was breaking, but she could see the twisted logic. If she was arrested, both children would suffer. This way, at least one of them would have a chance at a real life. "Which one?" she asked, the words tasting like poison. Valerie looked at the babies, then pointed to the one who'd been born first. "That one, she'll be Isabella Thornton. And the other, she stays Harper Caldwell, and you both disappear forever." Before leaving the hospital, Valerie made one final crucial stop at an exclusive jewelry store in downtown LA. She commissioned a perfect replica of the emerald ring Matthew had designed for his daughter. The original would go to Isabella, the copy to Harper. "If anyone ever asks," she told the jeweler, slipping him extra money for his silence, "you never made 2 rings." Back at the mansion, Valerie presented Isabella to Matthew as an adopted baby she'd found through a private agency. "She needed a family," Valerie explained, watching Matthew's face carefully. "And we need a daughter." Matthew held the baby and felt an inexplicable connection, stronger than he'd expected for an adopted child. He looked into Isabella's eyes and saw something familiar, something that made his heart ache with love and guilt in equal measure. "She's perfect," he whispered, and Valerie smiled triumphantly. For 27 years, the secret held. Rachel raised Harper in poverty, always looking over her shoulder, waiting for Valerie to change her mind. Matthew loved Isabella completely, never knowing she was his biological daughter, always carrying the guilt of abandoning Rachel and their unborn child. And Valerie kept her victory close, watching as Matthew poured his love into Isabella, while the other daughter, Harper, grew up believing her father had simply abandoned them both. Present day, The silence in the Thornton living room stretched between Isabella and Harper, like a chasm filled with questions neither knew how to ask. Isabella's mind was reeling, trying to process the impossible possibility that this stranger who looked exactly like her might actually be her sister. "I need to call someone," Isabella said finally, reaching for her phone. "A private investigator. If we're really sisters, there has to be evidence somewhere." Harper stood up, suddenly uncomfortable with the luxury surrounding her. "Look, Isabella, I appreciate the hospitality, but I should go. I've got work to finish, and this is all. It's too much. Please don't leave yet," Isabella said, and something in her voice made Harper pause. "I know this is crazy, but I felt like something was missing my entire life. And now you're here, and it feels like finding something you didn't know you'd lost." Harper finished quietly. "Exactly." As Harper walked toward the door, Isabella called out, "Can I at least have your number so we can figure this out together?" Harper hesitated, then nodded as she gave Isabella her contact information. Both women stared at their identical rings, glinting in the afternoon sunlight, like silent witnesses to a truth that had been buried for far too long. Neither of them noticed Valerie's car pulling into the driveway, or the way her face went white when she saw Harper through the living room window. The secret she'd protected for 27 years was about to unravel, and Valerie Thornton would do anything to stop it. The contrast between their worlds became starkly apparent over the next few days. While Isabella woke up in Egyptian cotton sheets to the sound of gardeners maintaining the perfectly manicured grounds, Harper's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. in her small apartment above Mrs. Chen's laundromat in Fresno. Isabella's morning routine involved choosing between designer outfits worth more than most people's cars. While Harper pulled on the same 3 work uniforms she rotated through the week, Isabella's breakfast was prepared by Maria and served on fine china. Harper grabbed a gas station coffee and a protein bar between deliveries. Yet despite the vast differences in their circumstances, both women found themselves inexplicably drawn to their phones, checking for messages from each other throughout the day. "You've been distracted all week," Danny, Harper's supervisor at Express Logistics, commented as she loaded packages into her truck. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just family stuff," Harper replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Didn't know you had family besides your mom?" "Neither did I," Harper muttered under her breath. Meanwhile, across the state, Isabella was having her own struggles with concentration. She'd canceled lunch with her usual social circle twice this week, claiming headaches. But really, she couldn't stop thinking about Harper. During her Pilates class, her trainer had to repeat instructions 3 times. "Isabella, honey, you're a million miles away today," said Cynthia Morrison, her mother's best friend from the country club. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just tired," Isabella lied, adjusting her emerald ring nervously, a habit she'd developed since meeting Harper. That evening, Isabella made a decision that would have horrified Valerie. She drove her Tesla to Fresno. The drive took her through parts of California she'd never seen, past farmland and small towns where people actually knew their neighbors' names. When she reached Harper's neighborhood, she felt like she'd entered a different world entirely. The apartment building was old but clean, with laundry hanging from balconies and children playing in a small courtyard. Isabella parked across the street and waited, feeling like a stalker but unable to help herself, when Harper emerged from the building at 6 p.m. Still in her work uniform, Isabella's breath caught. Seeing Harper in her natural environment somehow made their connection feel more real. Harper moved with purpose and confidence, nodding to neighbors who greeted her warmly. Isabella watched Harper enter a small grocery store and emerged 20 minutes later with 2 bags of what looked like basic necessities. No designer brands, no organic specialty items, just simple, practical choices. As Harper climbed the stairs to her apartment, Isabella found herself wondering what it would be like to live so simply, to work with her hands, to know exactly how much every dollar cost. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harper. "I keep thinking about you. This is weird, right?" Isabella typed back. "The weirdest. Want to meet tomorrow? I could drive up. Actually, I was thinking of coming to you. I have a delivery in Beverly Hills tomorrow afternoon." "Perfect. Same place. Your mansion. I still can't believe that's your actual house." Isabella smiled despite herself. "It's just a house. You should see it properly this time." The next day, Harper arrived at the Thornton mansion at 3 p.m. sharp. But this time she wasn't there for work. She'd changed out of her uniform into jeans and a simple blouse, and Isabella could see she'd made an effort to look nice. "Welcome to my world," Isabella said, opening the door before Harper could knock. "This place is insane," Harper said, looking up at the crystal chandelier. "How do you even dust that thing?" "Very carefully, according to Maria," Isabella laughed. "Want some coffee? We can talk on the terrace." As they settled into comfortable chairs overlooking the infinity pool and the city beyond, both women felt the same strange sense of belonging they'd experienced before. "Can I ask you something personal?" Isabella said, pouring coffee from a silver service that probably cost more than Harper's monthly rent. "Shoot. What was your childhood like? Really like?" Harper considered the question carefully. "Quiet, I guess. It was just me and my mom. She worked a lot, sometimes 2 jobs, but she always made time for me. We didn't have much money, but we had each other." She paused. "What about you?" "Lonely," Isabella admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. "I had everything money could buy, but my parents were always busy. Dad with work, Mom with her social obligations. I spent a lot of time with nannies and tutors. Did you ever feel like something was missing?" "Always. I used to imagine I had a sister somewhere." Isabella's eyes widened as she realized what she'd just said. "God, that sounds crazy now." "Not crazy at all. I used to dream about having a twin, someone who would understand me completely." Harper touched her emerald ring unconsciously. "My mom always said this ring was special, that it connected me to someone important." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun reflect off the pool. "Harper," Isabella said slowly, "tell me about your mom. What's she like?" "Rachel's amazing. She's tough. Had to be, raising me alone. But she's also incredibly kind. She makes the most beautiful clothes you've ever seen. All by hand. Some of her regular customers have been coming to her for 20 years. Harper's voice softened with love. "She sacrificed everything for me." "Where's your father?" "Gone. According to Mom, he was someone she worked for who disappeared when he found out she was pregnant. She's never told me his name, just that he was from a different world and couldn't handle the responsibility." Isabella's heart began to race. "She worked for him. What kind of work?" "Domestic work, I think. Cleaning, that sort of thing." "Why?" Before Isabella could answer, the sound of a car door slamming echoed from the front of the house. Both women looked up to see Valerie Thornton walking across the lawn, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Isabella, darling," Valerie called out in a voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Who's your guest?" "Mom. This is Harper. Harper. My mother. Valerie Thornton." Harper stood politely and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Thornton." Valerie's eyes locked onto Harper's face, then dropped to the emerald ring on her finger. For just a moment, her composure cracked, and Isabella saw something that looked like terror flash across her mother's features. "How unusual," Valerie said, recovering quickly. "You two could be sisters." "Actually, we think we might be," Isabella said. Watching her mother's face carefully, Valerie's laugh sounded forced. "Don't be ridiculous, darling. You're adopted, remember? There's no way you could have a biological sister. But look at us, Mom. Look at our rings. Coincidences happen. Isabella, the world is full of people who look similar." Valerie's voice had taken on a sharp edge. "I'm sure your friend has somewhere else she needs to be." Harper felt the dismissal like a slap, but she kept her dignity intact. "Actually, I do need to get going. Long drive back to Fresno." As Harper gathered her things to leave, Isabella walked her to the car. "I'm sorry about that. My mother can be protective. It's okay, I understand. I don't exactly fit in here." Harper paused by her truck. "But, Isabella, did you notice how your mother reacted when she saw my ring?" "Yeah, she looked scared." "Why would she be scared of a ring?" Isabella didn't have an answer, but she was beginning to suspect that Valerie knew more about Harper than she was letting on. As Harper drove away, Isabella stood in the driveway, her mind racing with possibilities that were too frightening to fully consider. Inside the house, Valerie was already on the phone with someone, her voice low and urgent. "We have a problem," she hissed. She found her. After 27 years, she found her. Isabella couldn't hear the response, but she heard her mother's next words clearly. Then we need to make sure they never see each other again. Alexander Brooks had seen a lot of strange cases in his 15 years as a private investigator. But Isabella Thornton's request was definitely among the most unusual. He sat across from her in his modest downtown lay office, studying the photos she'd shown him of herself and Harper side by side. "You're absolutely certain you've never met this woman before last week?" he asked, adjusting his reading glasses. "Positive, but Alex, look at these pictures. We're identical, and the rings." Isabella held up her hand, showing him the emerald ring. "She has the exact same one, and you want me to investigate the possibility that you're biological sisters. I want you to find out everything. Where Harper really came from, why we look identical, how she got that ring, and why my mother looked like she'd seen a ghost when she met Harper yesterday." Alexander leaned back in his chair. He'd worked for wealthy families before, and he knew that money often came with secrets. "Isabella, I have to ask, are you prepared for what I might find? Sometimes the truth isn't what we want to hear. I've felt incomplete my entire life, Alex, like a piece of me was missing. If Harper is my sister, I need to know. And if someone deliberately kept us apart," Isabella's voice hardened, "I need to know that too. All right, I'll start with the basics. Birth records, hospital records, anything I can find about both of your births. It might take a few days." Meanwhile, in Fresno, Harper was having her own confrontation. She'd driven straight home from Beverly Hills with her head spinning, and when she walked into their small apartment, she found Rachel waiting with dinner already prepared. "How was your day, honey?" Rachel asked, but Harper could see the tension in her mother's shoulders. "Interesting." Harper sat down at their small kitchen table and studied her mother's face. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Rachel's hand stilled on her coffee cup. "What is it? 27 years ago when I was born, was there anything unusual about my birth? Anything you haven't told me? Why are you asking this?" "Because I met someone yesterday. Someone who looks exactly like me and has a ring identical to mine. Her name is Isabella Thornton." The coffee cup slipped from Rachel's hands, shattering on the kitchen floor. Coffee spread across the linoleum like spilled secrets. "Thornton?" Rachel whispered, her face going pale. "Mom, what aren't you telling me?" Harper knelt to help clean up the broken pieces, but her eyes never left her mother's face. "You know that name, don't you?" Rachel's hands were shaking as she picked up ceramic shards. "Harper, there are things about your birth, about your father, things I've never told you because I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From people who could hurt you, people with power and money who wouldn't hesitate to destroy us if they knew you existed." Harper felt her world tilting. "Is Isabella my sister?" Rachel closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were filled with tears. "I can't tell you that. Can't or won't. Both." Rachel stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "Harper, please. Some secrets are kept for good reasons. Let this go." But Harper had inherited her mother's stubborn streak. "I can't let it go, Mom. I found her, and she's looking for answers too. We're going to find out the truth with or without your help." That same evening, Alexander was making his first breakthrough. He'd started with the obvious: birth certificates for both women. Isabella's showed she was born at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center on March 15, 1997. But when he looked closer, something seemed off about the documentation. He called his contact at the hospital, a records clerk who owed him a favor from a previous case. "Jenny, I need you to look up a birth record from 1997. Isabella Thornton, born March 15th. "Sure, give me a minute," he heard typing in the background. "That's weird, Alex. I'm showing some irregularities in the file." "What kind of irregularities?" "It looks like the original records were modified several times. There are digital fingerprints showing changes made to the file as recently as 1998. And there's a note here about a private adoption. But the adoption agency isn't listed. Can you dig deeper?" "I'll try. But whoever handled this had serious connections. The file's been locked down tight." Alexander hung up, feeling more intrigued than ever. In his experience, people only buried records this deeply when they had something significant to hide. The next morning, Isabella was having breakfast with her father when Valerie swept into the dining room with an expression that could freeze champagne. "Matthew, we need to talk," Valerie announced, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Good morning to you too, dear." Matthew replied mildly, not looking up from his newspaper. Isabella, how did your meeting go yesterday with that young woman? Isabella nearly choked on her orange juice. She hadn't mentioned Harper to her father yet. How did you... Your mother told me she seemed quite concerned about this friendship. Valerie's eyes flashed dangerously. Concerned is putting it mildly, Isabella. I forbid you from seeing that girl again. Excuse me. Isabella set down her glass harder than necessary. You forbid me. I'm 27 years old, Mom. And you're still living under our roof, using our money and carrying our name. That gives me certain rights. Matthew finally looked up from his paper, sensing the tension. What's this about? It's about our daughter getting involved with some working-class girl who's clearly trying to take advantage of her, Valerie said quickly. This Harper person is obviously after money. That's not true, Isabella protested. Harper didn't even want to come inside the house. She's not after anything except answers. Answers to what? Matthew asked, genuinely curious now. Isabella took a deep breath. Dad, Harper and I look exactly alike, identical, and she has a ring that's exactly the same as mine. The one you said was made exclusively for me. Matthew's newspaper fell from his hands. What did you say? We think we might be sisters, twins. Actually, the silence that followed was deafening. Matthew stared at Isabella with an expression she couldn't read, while Valerie looked like she might be sick. That's impossible, Valerie said finally. Isabella, you're adopted. We've told you this your whole life. There's no way you could have a biological sister. Then explain the rings, Isabella challenged. Explain why we look identical. Explain why you looked terrified when you saw her. Matthew was studying his wife's face with new interest. Valerie, is there something you haven't told us? Don't be ridiculous, Matthew. I'm just concerned about Isabella getting mixed up with the wrong sort of people. But Isabella could see something in her father's eyes. A recognition, a fear, a guilt that hadn't been there before. Dad, she said quietly, when I was born, do you remember anything unusual? Anything at all? Matthew was quiet for a long moment when he spoke. His voice was careful, measured. Isabella, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago. Matthew? No, Valerie said sharply. About what? Isabella pressed. About your adoption, it wasn't quite as straightforward as we led you to believe. Valerie stood up abruptly. I won't sit here and listen to this nonsense, Isabella. If you continue pursuing this ridiculous fantasy, there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Isabella stood to face her mother. The kind that involve your trust fund, your place in this family, and your future. Choose wisely, darling. With that, Valerie swept out of the room, leaving father and daughter staring at each other across a table that suddenly felt like a chasm. Dad, Isabella whispered. What did she mean about my adoption not being straightforward? Matthew looked older than she'd ever seen him. Isabella, there are things about your birth, about our family, things I've been too much of a coward to face. Tell me. I can't. Not yet. But I promise you this. If you and this Harper girl are really sisters, if someone has kept you apart all these years, his voice broke slightly, then somebody is going to pay for it. As Isabella left for her meeting with Alexander that afternoon, she didn't notice the black sedan that followed her car, or the man inside taking photos of everyone she talked to. Valerie Thornton was making sure she knew exactly what threats she was facing, and she was prepared to eliminate every single one of them. The confrontation came at 7 a.m. sharp. Just as Isabella was pouring her first cup of coffee, Valerie burst into the kitchen like a woman possessed, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled and her eyes blazing with fury. You hired a private investigator, she hissed, slamming a manila folder onto the marble countertop. Alexander Brooks, don't even think about denying it. Isabella's blood turned cold. She hadn't told anyone about hiring Alexander except Harper. How did you... I have my ways, and I'm telling you right now to call him off. No, Isabella lifted her chin defiantly. I have a right to know the truth about my past. You have a right to the life I've given you. Valerie's composure cracked completely. The privileged, pampered existence that millions of girls would kill for, and you want to throw it all away for some truck driver from Fresno. If that truck driver is my sister, then yes. Valerie's laugh was sharp and bitter. Your sister. Isabella, you're living in a fantasy. This Harper person is a con artist who saw an opportunity and took it. Then you won't mind if Alexander investigates and proves that, will you? I mind because it's a waste of time and money, and because it's opening doors that should stay closed. Valerie moved closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Call off the investigation, Isabella. I won't ask again. And if I don't, then you'll discover just how quickly your privileged life can disappear. Trust funds can be revoked, inheritance can be redirected, and family names can be stripped away. Don't test me on this. Isabella stared at the woman who had raised her, seeing a stranger in Valerie's cold eyes. You're that afraid of what Alexander might find. I'm protecting this family from scandal and embarrassment, something you clearly don't understand. After Valerie stormed out, Isabella immediately called Alexander. She knows about the investigation. My mother knows I hired you. That's concerning, Alexander said grimly. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never had a client's family find out this quickly, unless someone was watching very carefully. What do you mean? I mean someone's been following you, Isabella, or following me. Either way, we've struck a nerve. Meanwhile, in Fresno, Harper was dealing with her own crisis. She'd left for work that morning to find her truck's tires slashed and a note tucked under her windshield wiper. Drop the rich girl fantasy. Some people don't belong together. What the hell? She muttered. Looking around the parking lot, no one else's vehicle had been touched. Danny, her supervisor, walked over as she was examining the damage. Jesus, Harper, who'd you piss off? I have no idea. But even as she said it, Harper's mind went immediately to Isabella's mother, and that look of pure hatred she'd seen in Valerie's eyes. You need to file a police report, Danny said. Yeah, I will. Harper pulled out her phone to call Isabella, but before she could dial, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Two men in expensive suits got out and walked directly toward her. Harper Caldwell. The taller one had dead eyes and a smile that never reached them. Who's asking? Friends of the family. We need to have a conversation. Danny sensed trouble and moved closer. Everything okay here, Harper? We're just here to talk, the second man said, but his hand moved to his jacket in a way that made Harper's blood run cold. Danny, call the police, Harper said quietly. That won't be necessary, the first man said smoothly. We're just here to give Miss Caldwell some friendly advice about staying away from people who are out of her league. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Rich girls, fancy houses, emerald rings. Sometimes it's better to stick to your own kind, you know. The threat was clear, even wrapped in polite language. Harper felt fear crawl up her spine, but she stood her ground. I don't respond well to threats. This isn't a threat. Sweetheart, it's a warning. Next time might be different. As the men walked back to their SUV, Danny grabbed Harper's arm. What the hell was that about? I think I'm in deeper trouble than I realized. That afternoon, Alexander made a breakthrough that changed everything. His contact at the hospital had managed to access the original, unmodified records from 1997. Alex, you need to hear this, Jenny said over the phone. I found the original birth certificate before it was altered. Isabella Thornton wasn't born at Cedars-Sinai. Where was she born? St. Mary's Women's Clinic. It's a small private facility that handles delicate situations for wealthy families. And here's the kicker. According to the original records, she wasn't born alone. Alexander's pulse quickened. Twins. Born to a woman named Rachel Caldwell. Caldwell. As in Harper Caldwell. Looks like it, Alex. Someone went to a lot of trouble to bury this information. The clinic's records were sealed. The original birth certificates were modified. And there are huge gaps in the documentation. Can you get me copies of everything? I'm trying, but I'm being blocked at every turn. This goes high up, Alex. Like scary high up. After hanging up, Alexander immediately called Isabella. We need to meet now, and bring Harper if you can reach her. When Isabella called Harper, she could hear the stress in her voice immediately. Thank God you called, Isabella. I think we're in danger. What do you mean? Harper told her about the slashed tires and the men in suits. They knew about you, about us meeting. Someone's watching us. Where are you now? At work. But I don't feel safe going home alone. Then don't. Come to Beverly Hills. Stay here tonight. Isabella, I can't. Yes, you can. Whatever's happening, we're stronger together than apart, and I think my investigator found something important. That evening, as Harper drove toward Beverly Hills with her rearview mirror constantly checked, she didn't notice the black sedan following 3 cars behind. Isabella met her at the front gate of the estate, and they drove up the winding driveway together. As they parked, Isabella noticed Harper's hands were shaking. "Hey," Isabella said gently. "We're going to figure this out. What if we don't? What if whoever's doing this decides we know too much?" Before Isabella could answer, Alexander's car pulled up behind them. He got out carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression that mixed excitement with concern. "Ladies, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "I found the original birth records. You are sisters, twins, born to Rachel Caldwell at St. Mary's Women's Clinic on March 15, 1997. Harper sank onto the front steps of the mansion. "So it's true. It's true. But that's not all. Someone has been systematically covering this up for 27 years. Professional-level document alteration, sealed records, modified birth certificates. This wasn't some simple adoption mix-up." "Then what was it?" Isabella asked. "I think someone deliberately separated you two, and I think they're willing to go to extreme lengths to keep it a secret." As if summoned by his words, Valerie's car screeched into the driveway. She got out and marched toward them with fire in her eyes. "What is she doing here?" Valerie demanded, pointing at Harper. "She's staying here tonight," Isabella said firmly. "Someone threatened her today. Threatened her. Don't be ridiculous." Alexander stepped forward. "Mrs. Thornton, we know about St. Mary's Clinic. We know about Rachel Caldwell. We know these two are biological sisters." Valerie's face went white, then red, then white again. "You don't know anything. I know enough. The question is, are you going to tell us the rest? Or do we keep digging until we find out who separated these twins and why?" For a moment, Isabella thought her mother might actually tell the truth. Valerie's shoulders sagged, and she looked older than her 55 years. Then her spine straightened, and the cold mask slipped back into place. "Get off my property," she said to Alexander, "and take that girl with you." "No," Isabella said quietly. "Harper stays, and if you try to make her leave, I'll go with her." "Isabella, you don't understand what you're doing. Then explain it to me. Tell me why you separated us. Tell me why you've been lying to me my entire life." Valerie looked at her daughter, then at Harper, then at the folder of evidence in Alexander's hands. When she spoke, her voice was deadly calm. "You want the truth, fine, but remember, Isabella, you asked for this, and once you know, there's no going back to the life you had before." But Valerie's confession never came. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked back to her car without another word, leaving the 3 of them standing in the driveway as her taillights disappeared into the night. "Well, that was dramatic," Alexander said dryly. "Isabella, I strongly suggest you get Harper inside and somewhere safe. I'm going to keep digging, but I have a feeling things are about to get more dangerous." As they watched Alexander drive away, Isabella turned to Harper, who was staring up at the massive mansion with wide eyes. "Come on," Isabella said gently. "Let me show you around properly this time." Walking through the front door, Harper felt like she was entering a museum. Everything was pristine, expensive, and intimidating. "Isabella, I really don't belong here. Stop saying that. This is as much your house as it is mine, apparently." Isabella led her through the foyer toward the grand staircase. "Besides, you're my sister. That means you belong wherever I belong." The word sister hung in the air between them, still too new and overwhelming to feel real. "The guest wing is this way," Isabella said, climbing the marble steps. "You'll have your own bathroom, walk-in closet, and a view of the garden." Harper's temporary room was larger than her entire apartment in Fresno. The bed alone probably cost more than her annual salary. "This is insane," she whispered. "I know it's a lot to take in." Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking as overwhelmed as Harper felt. "To be honest, I'm kind of freaking out too." "Are you?" Harper sat beside her, and immediately they both felt that strange sense of completion they'd experienced before. "Because you seem so put together. That's just practice." 27 years of being the perfect daughter. Isabella's voice was bitter. "Turns out I wasn't even being the perfect daughter to the right mother." They sat in silence for a moment. processing the enormity of what they'd discovered. "Can I ask you something?" Harper said quietly. "Anything. What was it like growing up here? Really like?" Isabella considered the question carefully. "Lonely, beautiful, but lonely. I had everything money could buy, but I always felt like something was missing, like I was only half of who I was supposed to be." "I felt the same way," Harper admitted. "Even though Mom and I were close, I always felt incomplete, like I was waiting for someone who never came. And now, here we are. Isabella stood up and walked to the window overlooking the gardens. "Harper, I want to teach you things. Social stuff, etiquette, how to navigate the world I grew up in. Why would I need to know that? Because in 2 weeks, my family is hosting the annual Thornton Charity Gala. 500 of the most influential people in California, and I want you there with me." Harper's eyes widened. "Isabella, I can't. I wouldn't know how to act, what to say. That's why I want to teach you. You're a Thornton too, Harper. It's time everyone knew it. What about your mother? She'll never allow it." Isabella's jaw set with determination. "My mother doesn't get a say anymore. This is our life now, and we're going to live it on our terms." Over the next few days, Isabella threw herself into what she privately called Operation Transform Harper, though she was careful never to use that phrase out loud. It wasn't about changing who Harper was. It was about giving her the tools to navigate Isabella's world with confidence. "Okay, so when you're introduced to someone at a formal event," Isabella explained as they practiced in the mansion's library, "you wait for them to extend their hand first if they're older or higher in social rank." "This is ridiculous," Harper protested. "Why can't I just say hi and shake hands like a normal person?" "Because these people aren't normal. They're sharks in designer suits, and they'll eat you alive if they sense weakness." "Maybe I don't want to swim with sharks." Isabella paused, realizing how her world must sound to someone like Harper. "You're right, it is ridiculous, but it's also reality. And if we're going to expose the truth about what Valerie did to us, we need to do it in a way that commands respect." Harper sighed. "Fine, but if I have to curtsy to anyone, I'm out." "No curtsying required. This isn't England." Their lessons continued throughout the week. Isabella taught Harper about wine pairings. Why do rich people make drinking so complicated? Proper posture. Stand like you own the room. Because you do. And how to make small talk with people who had more money than entire countries. Ask about their charities. They love talking about their tax write-offs. But the most important lessons weren't about etiquette. They were about each other. Isabella learned that Harper could fix anything mechanical. "I rebuilt the engine in my truck when I was 16. Had a wicked sense of humor. Your chandelier has more crystals than most people have teeth, and possessed an inner strength that came from surviving real hardship." Harper discovered that underneath Isabella's polished exterior was a woman who was deeply insecure. "I've never had to earn anything in my life. What if I'm completely useless? Fiercely loyal. If someone hurt you, I would destroy them. And desperate for genuine connection. Most of my friendships are about what I can do for people, not who I am." "You know what's funny?" Harper said one evening as they sat by the pool, both of them exhausted from a day of Duchess lessons, as Harper had dubbed them. "What? I spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't good enough, and you spent yours feeling like you weren't real enough." Isabella considered this. "Maybe we balance each other out. Maybe we do." The breakthrough moment came on Thursday evening. Isabella had arranged for a practice dinner with some of her more tolerant friends, people who wouldn't judge Harper too harshly if she made mistakes. Harper was nervous, fidgeting with her emerald ring as Isabella introduced her around the dining room. But when the conversation turned to the city's homeless crisis, Harper forgot all about etiquette and spoke passionately about the people she'd met during her delivery routes. "You see them every day," she said, her eyes bright with conviction. "Real people with real stories. Maria at the shelter downtown. She's got a master's degree in education, but one medical bankruptcy, and she lost everything. Tommy under the bridge. He's a veteran who can't get the mental health care he needs." The room fell silent. But it wasn't the uncomfortable silence Isabella had feared. It was the thoughtful silence of people being challenged to think beyond their comfortable bubbles. "That's fascinating," said David Chen, whose family owned half the real estate in downtown LA. "How do you think we could better address the systematic issues?" As Harper launched into a detailed discussion about affordable housing and healthcare access, Isabella watched with growing pride. Her sister wasn't just surviving in this world. She was elevating it. After the guests left, Isabella found Harper on the terrace, looking out over the city lights. "You were amazing tonight," Isabella said. "I was terrified. You didn't show it. They respected you, Harper, not because of your clothes or your manners, but because of who you are." Harper turned to face her sister. "Isabella, what are we really doing here? I mean, after the gala, after we expose whatever Valerie did, then what? Then we figure out how to be sisters, real sisters, even though we're from completely different worlds." Isabella looked at Harper, really looked at her. Despite the designer dress Isabella had bought her, despite the professional makeup and styled hair, Harper was still fundamentally herself, strong, genuine, uncompromising in her values. "We're not from different worlds," Isabella said finally. "We're from the same world. We just got separated for a while." As they stood together on the terrace, both wearing their identical emerald rings, the city of Los Angeles spread out below them like a glittering reminder of all the possibilities that lay ahead. Neither of them noticed the camera with the telephoto lens capturing their every move from the hills above the estate, or the woman behind it whose rage was growing stronger with each passing day. Valerie Thornton was documenting everything, building her case for why Harper Caldwell was a threat that needed to be eliminated permanently. Alexander Brooks had been working 18-hour days for the past week, and it showed. His usually neat office looked like a hurricane had hit it, documents scattered across every surface, empty coffee cups creating rings on his desk, and a corkboard covered with photos, timelines, and red string connecting various pieces of evidence. But he'd found the smoking gun. "Isabella, you need to get down here immediately," he said into his phone, his voice tight with excitement and exhaustion. "And bring Harper, I've got everything." An hour later, both women sat across from Alexander's desk, staring at the mountain of evidence he'd assembled. Medical records, financial documents, legal papers, and at the center of it all, a small digital recorder. "This," Alexander said, holding up the device, "changes everything." "What is it?" Isabella asked, though something in her stomach already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. "It's a recording Rachel Caldwell made 27 years ago. She's been carrying this secret all these years, and when I finally tracked her down and explained what was happening to you two, she decided it was time." Harper's face went white. "You talked to my mother when—" "Yesterday. She's been terrified for decades, Harper. Terrified of what Valerie would do if she ever spoke up. But seeing you two together, knowing you'd found each other," Alexander's voice softened. "She said it was like watching a miracle happen." "What's on the recording?" Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. "The confession that's going to destroy Valerie Thornton's life." Alexander pressed play, and suddenly the room filled with voices from nearly 3 decades ago. The quality was poor. It sounded like it had been recorded on an old cassette player hidden in someone's purse. But the words were crystal clear. "You can't do this, Mrs. Thornton. They're my babies. I can do whatever I want, Rachel. I have the power here. Not you. Please, I'm begging you. Don't separate them. One stays with you in your pathetic little life, and one comes with me to be raised properly. That's the deal. This is insane. They need each other. Twins have a bond. The only bond they'll have is the one I allow. Isabella will be my daughter, raised with every advantage money can buy. Harper will be your burden to bear. And if you ever try to contact us, if you ever try to tell anyone the truth, I will destroy you completely. You can't threaten me, can't I? I have enough fabricated evidence to have you arrested for extortion. Bank records showing you've been blackmailing my husband. Forged letters in your handwriting. One phone call from me, and you lose both children and go to prison. Is that what you want? The recording continued for another 10 minutes, documenting Valerie's systematic plan to separate the twins and terrorize Rachel into silence. By the time it ended, Harper was crying, and Isabella was shaking with rage. She stole us from each other, Isabella whispered. She literally stole 27 years of our lives. There's more, Alexander said grimly. He spread out a series of documents across his desk. DNA test results confirming you're twins. The original unaltered birth certificates showing you were both born to Rachel Caldwell. financial records showing payments Valerie made to falsify hospital records. And this, he held up a receipt from an exclusive jewelry store in downtown LA, dated 3 days after their birth. A receipt for creating a duplicate emerald ring, one original for Isabella, one copy for Harper. Valerie wanted to make sure that if the truth ever came out, she could claim she'd known about both children all along. Harper looked down at her ring with new understanding. So mine's the fake. Actually, no. According to the jeweler's notes, both rings were made from the same stones, the same gold. He couldn't tell me which was which. They're truly identical. Just like us, Isabella said softly. Alexander leaned forward. There's something else you need to know. I've been tracking Valerie's activities since you hired me, and she's been busy. She's hired a security firm, the same people who threatened Harper last week. She's had both of you followed. Your phones monitored, your movements documented. She's building a case against us, Harper realized. Worse than that. Based on some financial transfers I uncovered, I think she's planning something bigger, something permanent. Isabella's blood turned to ice. What do you mean, permanent? I mean, I think Valerie Thornton is desperate enough to make sure this secret stays buried forever, no matter what it takes. Before Alexander could elaborate, his office door burst open. Matthew Thornton stood in the doorway, his face haggard and his eyes wild. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Where's my wife?" "Dad!" Isabella stood up, shocked to see her father in such a state. "What are you doing here?" "I came to stop her before she does something we'll all regret." Matthew's eyes fell on Harper, and for a moment, his expression cracked with pain and recognition. "My God, you're both mine, aren't you?" "Mr. Thornton," Alexander said carefully, "maybe you should sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want answers. I've been living with fragments of the truth for weeks, putting pieces together, and what I've figured out," Matthew's voice broke. "What I've figured out makes me the worst father who ever lived." "Dad, you didn't know," Isabella said, moving toward him. "Didn't I?" Matthew's laugh was bitter. "Rachel Caldwell. 28 years ago, I had an affair with our housekeeper while Valerie was in England. When Rachel told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I gave her money and told her to disappear." The room fell silent except for the sound of Harper's sharp intake of breath. "But I never knew about twins," Matthew continued, his voice heavy with guilt. "When Valerie came back with a baby, with you, Isabella, and told me she'd adopted you through a private agency, I was so grateful, so relieved that I might have a chance to be a father to my child after all. I never questioned it. You knew Isabella was yours." Harper's voice was barely audible. "Deep down, yes. She looked like me, acted like me, had my stubborn streak, but I convinced myself it was just coincidence, just my guilty conscience making me see connections that weren't there." Alexander held up the DNA results. "They're there, Mr. Thornton. Isabella and Harper are both your daughters." Matthew sank into a chair, his face in his hands. Valerie knew. She knew all along that I was Isabella's biological father, and she used it to torture me every time I looked at Isabella. She would make some comment about how much I loved my adopted daughter. She was punishing me every single day for my affair, and punishing us by keeping us apart, Harper said, her voice hardening. "Where is Valerie now?" Alexander asked urgently. Matthew looked up with fear in his eyes. "That's why I'm here. She's lost it completely. When she found out you'd hired a private investigator, she started making phone calls, arranging meetings with dangerous people. She's convinced that if Harper simply disappeared, permanently, all of this would go away." Isabella felt the world tilt around her. "She's going to try to kill Harper. I think she's going to try to kill both of you," Matthew said quietly, "and make it look like an accident. She's been muttering about how twins dying together would be poetic justice." Alexander was already reaching for his phone. "We need to call the police." "No," Isabella said firmly. "We need to call everyone. Every reporter, every news outlet, every person who's going to be at the charity gala tomorrow night." "Isabella, what are you thinking?" Harper asked. "I'm thinking that Valerie's power comes from secrets and shadows. So let's drag everything into the light." Isabella's eyes blazed with determination. "Tomorrow night, in front of 500 of the most influential people in California, we're going to tell them exactly what Valerie Thornton did to us. That's incredibly dangerous, Alexander warned. Good. Let her try to kill us in front of 500 witnesses. Isabella turned to Harper. Are you with me? Harper looked at her sister, then at their father who had failed them both, then at the evidence of 27 years of lies spread across Alexander's desk. I'm with you, she said firmly. Let's burn her whole world down. The Beverly Hills Hotel ballroom had been transformed into a glittering wonderland for the annual Thornton Charity Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across tables laden with white orchids and gold accents. While a string quartet played softly in the corner, 500 of California's most powerful people mingled with champagne flutes, their designer gowns and tuxedos creating a sea of elegant black and jewel tones. Isabella stood at the edge of the ballroom, her heart pounding beneath her midnight blue Valentino gown. She'd chosen the dress deliberately. It made her emerald ring pop against the dark fabric, ensuring everyone would notice it when the time came. You look beautiful, Matthew said quietly. Appearing beside her, he'd aged a decade in the past week, the weight of his guilt and fear etched into every line of his face. Thank you. Isabella's voice was steady, though inside she felt like she might shatter. Where's Valerie? Working the room like nothing's wrong. She's been all smiles and charm tonight, playing the perfect hostess. Matthew's jaw tightened. She has no idea what's coming. Across the ballroom, Valerie Thornton was indeed in her element, gliding from group to group in a stunning emerald green gown that complemented her perfectly styled blonde hair. She laughed at the right moments, asked about the right family members, and made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. Valerie, darling, you've outdone yourself this year, gushed Margaret Whitmore, whose family owned most of Malibu. This gala gets more spectacular every time. Thank you, Margaret, though I have to admit, this year has been challenging to organize. Valerie's smile never wavered, but her eyes constantly scanned the room, looking for threats. Oh, how so? Family matters. You know how it is. Children can be so unpredictable when they reach a certain age. What Valerie didn't know was that Harper had already arrived. Entering through the service entrance with the catering staff as planned, Alexander had arranged for her to slip in unnoticed, giving her time to position herself strategically before the evening's main event. Harper felt completely out of place in her borrowed designer gown, a stunning silver number that Isabella had insisted suited her perfectly. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, and the heels made her feel like she was walking on stilts, but she forced herself to move with confidence. Remember, she whispered to herself, repeating Isabella's coaching, you belong here. You have every right to be in this room. She made her way to the designated spot near the main stage. Accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and trying to blend in with the crowd, several people glanced at her with curiosity. She was clearly beautiful and well-dressed, but no one could quite place her. I don't think we've met, said David Chen, the real estate mogul who'd been at Isabella's practice dinner. You look familiar, though. I have one of those faces, Harper replied with a smile, grateful for the practice conversation she'd had with Isabella's friends. Meanwhile, Isabella was making her own strategic moves through the crowd. She stopped at each table, greeting old family friends and business associates, all while subtly mentioning that she had an important announcement to make during the evening's program. An announcement? Asked Richard Morrison, whose tech company had made him one of the youngest billionaires in California. What kind of announcement? The kind that changes everything, Isabella said mysteriously, then moved on before he could ask more questions. At exactly 9 p.m., Matthew took the stage for the traditional welcome speech. The ballroom fell quiet as 500 pairs of eyes turned toward him, champagne glasses poised halfway to lips. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the 25th Annual Thornton Charity Gala, Matthew began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. As you know, this event has always been about bringing families together to support those in need. In the audience, Valerie smiled proudly, basking in the admiration of their peers. But tonight, Matthew continued, his voice taking on a different tone. I want to talk about a different kind of family, about the bonds that connect us, even when we don't know they exist. Valerie's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the speech they'd rehearsed. 27 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life, Matthew said, his voice growing stronger with each word. I abandoned someone I should have protected. I let fear and cowardice guide my decisions, and the consequences of those decisions have haunted our family ever since. The ballroom was dead silent now, the air thick with tension and curiosity. Tonight, I want to introduce you to my daughter, my biological daughter, who I've only recently had the courage to acknowledge. At his signal, Harper stepped onto the stage. A murmur rippled through the crowd as people registered her stunning beauty and tried to place where they'd seen her before. "This is Harper Caldwell," Matthew announced, "and she's about to meet her twin sister for the first time in public." The murmur became a gasp as Isabella joined Harper on stage. Standing side by side in the spotlight, their identical features were unmistakable, even in different colored gowns. Even with different styling, they were clearly two halves of the same whole. "My God," someone whispered loudly enough to be heard. "They're identical." Isabella took the microphone from her father with steady hands. "Good evening, everyone. Most of you have known me my entire life as Isabella Thornton, adopted daughter of Matthew and Valerie. But tonight, I want to tell you the real story." In the audience, Valerie had gone pale as marble. She started to stand, perhaps to leave or to stop what was happening, but found her way blocked by several of Alexander's associates positioned strategically throughout the room. 27 years ago, Isabella continued, "Harper and I were born as twins to a young woman named Rachel Caldwell. We should have grown up together, supporting each other, loving each other, being the family that twins are meant to be." Harper took the microphone, her voice slightly shaky but determined. "Instead, we were deliberately separated by someone who decided that one of us deserved a life of privilege while the other deserved nothing." The audience was riveted, hanging on every word. "Tonight," Isabella said, taking back the microphone, "we want to show you the evidence of what was done to us." Alexander appeared at the side of the stage, wheeling out a large screen and projector. Within moments, the ballroom was filled with the sound of Rachel's 27-year-old recording. Valerie's voice crystal clear as she detailed her plan to separate the twins and terrorize their mother into silence. As the recording played, Isabella and Harper stood side by side, raising their hands to show their identical emerald rings glinting under the stage lights. "Two rings," Isabella said into the stunned silence that followed the recording. "Two sisters. Two lives that should never have been separated." The ballroom erupted in chaos. People shouted questions. Phones appeared to capture photos and videos, and reporters who'd been alerted by Alexander began pushing forward for statements. But all eyes eventually turned to Valerie, who was standing frozen in the middle of the dance floor, her face a mask of pure hatred and defeat. "You stupid, ungrateful girls," she hissed, her composure finally cracking completely. "You have no idea what you've just done. You think you've won, but you've destroyed everything. Everything." "We've told the truth," Harper said simply. "That's all we've done." "The truth," Valerie laughed bitterly. "The truth is that I gave you both more than you deserved, Isabella. I raised you, loved you, gave you every advantage. And Harper, I let you live when I could have made sure you disappeared permanently." The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud, recorded by dozens of phones and witnessed by 500 of the most influential people in California. As security moved to escort Valerie from the ballroom, she turned back for one final venomous look at the twins standing together on stage. "This isn't over," she snarled. "You may have won tonight, but I'll make sure you both pay for this betrayal." But Isabella and Harper weren't listening to her threats anymore. They were looking at each other, finally free to be sisters in front of the whole world, their identical rings catching the light as they reached for each other's hands. The ballroom fell into stunned silence as Valerie's security escort reached the exit doors. But before they could usher her out completely, Alexander Brooks stepped forward with a final devastating blow. "Wait," he called out, his voice cutting through the murmur of shocked conversations. "There's one more thing everyone needs to hear." He held up a second recording device, newer than the first. This was recorded just 3 days ago, when Mrs. Thornton thought she was speaking privately with her hired security team. Valerie's face went from pale to ashen. "You can't." "I can, and I will." Alexander pressed play, and Valerie's voice filled the ballroom once again. But this time the words were even more damning. "I don't care what it costs or how you do it. Both of them need to disappear permanently. Make it look like an accident. A car crash. A break-in gone wrong. I don't care. Just make sure neither of those girls can ever threaten my family again. What about the investigation? The private detective? Him too, if necessary. I've spent 27 years protecting this secret, and I'm not going to let some truck driver and a private investigator destroy everything I've built. The recording continued for another 2 minutes, documenting Valerie's detailed plans for having Isabella, Harper, and Alexander killed. By the time it ended, several people in the audience were visibly shaken, and at least 3 had their phones out calling the police. Murder for hire, Alexander announced to the room. Conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, child endangerment, and that's just the beginning of the charges Mrs. Thornton will be facing. Valerie tried to run, but found herself surrounded by hotel security, several off-duty police officers who'd been attending the gala, and a growing crowd of witnesses who weren't about to let her escape. "This is all lies," she screamed, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. "Fabricated evidence. That recording is fake." "Actually," said a new voice from the back of the ballroom, "it's not." Everyone turned to see Rachel Caldwell walking slowly through the crowd. She was dressed simply but elegantly, in a navy dress that Isabella had bought for her, her graying hair styled professionally for the first time in years. In her hands, she carried a worn leather purse that seemed out of place among all the designer bags in the room. "Rachel," Harper's voice broke with emotion as she saw her mother for the first time since this whole nightmare began. "Hello, sweetheart," Rachel said softly, her eyes never leaving Harper's face. "Hello, Isabella." The twins stepped down from the stage and moved toward the woman who had raised one of them and been forced to give up the other. The ballroom watched in absolute silence as the 3 women came together in the center of the dance floor. "I should have been braver," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face as she looked at both her daughters. "I should have fought harder to keep you together. You did what you had to do to survive," Harper said fiercely. "We don't blame you for any of this." "That's right," Isabella added, surprising herself with how naturally the words came. "The only person to blame is standing right there." All eyes turned back to Valerie, who was now flanked by 2 police officers who had arrived in response to the 911 calls from the gala attendees. "Mrs. Thornton," one of the officers said formally, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, child endangerment, and intimidation of witnesses." As they read her rights, Valerie's mask of civility finally fell away completely. "You think you've won," she snarled at the twins. "You think this changes anything, Isabella? You're nothing without the Thornton name. And Harper, you're still just a poor girl from Fresno who doesn't belong in this world." "You're wrong," Matthew said, stepping forward to stand with his daughters. "They're both Thorntons by blood. They belong here more than you ever did." The crowd watched in fascination as Matthew looked directly at Valerie, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd finally found his backbone. "Effective immediately, you are no longer welcome in my home, my business, or my family. Our marriage is over. You can't do this to me, Matthew. I made you who you are. I gave you the perfect life. You gave me a life built on lies and cruelty. Isabella and Harper have shown me what real family looks like." Matthew turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to know that I'm immediately transferring 50% of Thornton Logistics to Harper Caldwell, my daughter who was stolen from me 27 years ago. Isabella and Harper will be equal partners in the family business." The announcement sent another wave of shock through the ballroom. 50% of Thornton Logistics was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Harper looked stunned. "Dad, I don't know anything about running a company." "You'll learn," Isabella said firmly, taking her sister's hand. "We'll learn together." As the police led Valerie away, she turned back one final time, her face twisted with rage and defeat. "This isn't over. You think you can just replace me? You think you can erase 27 years? We're not trying to erase anything," Isabella called after her. "We're just finally telling the truth." The ballroom doors closed behind Valerie with a definitive click, and suddenly the atmosphere in the room completely changed. The tension that had been building all evening finally broke, and people began to approach the twins with congratulations, questions, and expressions of support. "This is the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed," said Margaret Whitmore, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "You girls are so brave. To think we've all been socializing with a woman capable of such cruelty," added Richard Morrison, shaking his head in disbelief. Alexander appeared at the twins' sides, looking exhausted but triumphant. "It's over," he said simply. "The recording, the witnesses, the evidence. Valerie will never see freedom again." "What happens now?" Harper asked, still looking overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "Now," said Matthew, putting his arms around both his daughters, "we become the family we always should have been." Rachel stepped forward, her voice shaky but determined. "Isabella, I know I have no right to ask this, but would you like to know about your first few days of life before Valerie took you away?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "I would love that." As the crowd began to disperse and the evening wound down, the five of them, Matthew, Rachel, Isabella, Harper, and Alexander, found themselves alone on the hotel's terrace overlooking the glittering lights of Beverly Hills. "I have something for you both," Rachel said. Reaching into her worn purse, she pulled out a small photo album, its cover faded with age. Pictures from the hospital, the only ones I was able to take before everything changed. The twins leaned in together to look at the photos, images of two identical babies sleeping peacefully side by side, their tiny hands touching, their faces serene and perfect. "You were inseparable even then," Rachel whispered. "The nurses said they'd never seen twins so connected. When one cried, the other would reach out until they were touching again." Isabella and Harper looked at each other, then down at their identical emerald rings, understanding finally clicking into place. "The rings," Harper said softly. "She made sure we'd always have something connecting us, even when we were apart. Even Valerie couldn't completely break the bond between you," Rachel said. "Some connections are stronger than cruelty." As they stood together on the terrace, the first family they'd ever truly been, none of them noticed the lone photographer capturing the moment from across the street, not for blackmail or threats this time, but for the morning edition of the Los Angeles Times, which would run the headline, "Twins Reunited, the shocking truth behind Beverly Hills' most scandalous night." The story of Isabella and Harper Thornton was just beginning. 6 months later, the sun was just beginning to rise over the Santa Monica Mountains as Isabella stood on the terrace of the Thornton mansion, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up below. The house felt different now, warmer, more alive, filled with the kind of laughter and conversation it had never known during Valerie's reign. "You're up early," Harper said, joining her sister on the terrace with her own steaming mug. Even after 6 months, Isabella still felt a little thrill every time she saw Harper in the morning. The reminder that she was real, that they were finally together. "Board meeting at 9, Isabella replied. "The Henderson acquisition papers need to be reviewed one more time before we sign." Harper grinned. "Listen to you, all businesslike. Remember when you didn't think I could learn to run a company? I remember when you didn't think you belonged in this world at all." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the landscapers tend to the gardens below. The estate looked the same as it always had, but everything else had changed dramatically. The trial had been swift and decisive. Valerie Thornton was sentenced to 25 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, child endangerment, and a dozen other charges. The media had dubbed it the Beverly Hills twin scandal, and for months, their story had dominated headlines across the country. But the real transformation had happened within the Thornton family itself. Matthew had stepped back from day-to-day operations of Thornton Logistics, taking on a chairman role while his daughters learned to run the business together. To everyone's surprise, including their own, Isabella and Harper made an incredible team. Isabella's social connections and business education complemented Harper's practical experience and street-smart instincts perfectly. "The Henderson deal is going to change everything," Harper said, leaning against the terrace railing. 3,000 new jobs, and every single one comes with full benefits and profit sharing. "Valerie would be horrified," Isabella said with dark satisfaction. "Imagine actually caring about the people who work for us." Under the twins' leadership, Thornton Logistics had become something entirely different. They'd implemented fair wage policies, comprehensive health care, and educational assistance programs. The company's profits had actually increased as employee satisfaction soared and turnover plummeted. "Speaking of people who work for us," Harper said, "Rachel wants to know if you're still coming to dinner Sunday night." Isabella smiled. Sunday dinners at Rachel's small but comfortable new apartment had become a family tradition. Matthew had bought Rachel a beautiful place near the beach and offered her a position as head of Thornton Logistics' new community outreach division, a role that utilized her decades of experience helping struggling families. Wouldn't miss it. Is Alexander coming? Of course, I think Mom has a crush on him. Isabella laughed. I think the feeling is mutual. Did you see the way he looks at her when she talks about her work with the homeless shelter? The relationship that had developed between Rachel and Alexander over the past months had been one of the unexpected joys of their new family dynamic. Both had spent years carrying secrets and pain, and they'd found healing in each other's honesty and strength. They deserve happiness, Harper said softly. After everything they've been through. We all do. The sound of footsteps on the terrace interrupted their conversation. Matthew appeared, already dressed for the office despite the early hour. Good morning, daughters, he said, and Isabella could hear the pride and joy in his voice every time he said those words. Ready for the big day. Today's board meeting wasn't just about the Henderson acquisition. It was the official launch of the Thornton Family Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to reuniting separated families and supporting single mothers. It would be funded by the massive settlement they'd won from Valerie's estate, and managed jointly by Isabella and Harper. More than ready, Isabella said. Harper's presentation on the family reunification program is going to blow everyone away. Harper blushed slightly. 6 months ago, she would never have imagined herself giving presentations to boards of directors. Now, she commanded rooms full of executives with confidence and grace, though she still wore her work boots under her designer suits, a small rebellion that made Isabella smile every time she noticed it. The program is really Rachel's brainchild, Harper said modestly. I'm just the one presenting it. You're both incredible, Matthew said, looking at his daughters with unconcealed pride. Your mother would be so proud. He meant Rachel, of course. They all considered Rachel to be Isabella's mother now, just as much as Harper's. The woman who had raised Harper with such love and strength had welcomed Isabella into her heart completely, filling a maternal void that Isabella hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. As they prepared to leave for the office, Isabella caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. She looked different than she had 6 months ago. Not just physically, though her face had more color and life in it now. She looked complete in a way she never had before. The emerald ring on her finger caught the morning light, and she thought about the matching ring Harper wore every day. 2 rings, 2 sisters, 2 halves of a whole that had finally been reunited. The board meeting went even better than expected. The Henderson acquisition was approved unanimously, and the foundation presentation received a standing ovation. Harper's proposal for a national database to help locate separated siblings was particularly well received, with several board members offering to provide additional funding. I have one more announcement, Isabella said as the meeting was winding down. Harper and I have decided to sell the Beverly Hills house. This caused a stir among the board members, many of whom had attended parties at the Thornton mansion over the years. We're going to convert it into a residential facility for families in transition, Harper explained. A place where mothers and children can stay while they get back on their feet, where separated families can be reunited in a safe, comfortable environment. It seems appropriate, Isabella added, to turn a house where a family was torn apart into a place where families can be put back together. After the meeting, the twins found themselves alone in the executive conference room, looking out over the city where they'd both been born, but only one had been allowed to grow up. Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if Valerie hadn't separated us? Harper asked. Isabella considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But then I think about all the people we never would have met, all the experiences we never would have had. You never would have developed that incredible work ethic, that ability to connect with people from all walks of life, and I never would have learned to navigate this world of business and privilege. So you think everything happened for a reason? I think everything happened. Period. Good, bad, painful, beautiful. It all led us here, to this moment, to each other. Isabella reached over and took Harper's hand, their identical rings touching. And I wouldn't change a single thing if it meant we might not have found our way back to each other. Harper squeezed her sister's hand. Even Valerie, her cruelty brought us together in the end. Her lies made us appreciate the truth. Her hatred taught us the value of love. As the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the twins sat together in comfortable silence, planning their future and marveling at the journey that had brought them home. In the distance, they could see the lights beginning to twinkle across the city. Millions of people living their own stories, facing their own challenges, searching for their own missing pieces. And somewhere among all those lights, Isabella knew there were other families waiting to be reunited, other secrets waiting to be uncovered, other loves waiting to triumph over the forces that tried to tear them apart. The emerald rings caught the last rays of sunlight, two identical symbols of a bond that had survived separation, lies, and 27 years of enforced silence. Some connections, Isabella thought as she watched her sister's face light up with plans for their foundation's next project, truly are stronger than anything that tries to break them.